Hello and welcome back to the Analyst Eye, brought to you by the Guinness PRO14. I'm Murray Kinsella of the 42.ie. I'm joined as always by Sean Holley of Premier Sports. Well, Sean, just days away from the Guinness PRO14 final, Ulster and Leinster. It's going to be a cracker. But you're a man who's got experience of these big occasions with the Ospreys. What's it like being involved? What's important in a week like this?
Well, it's a different week, isn't it, than these teams are used to. Well, back in the day, Murray, it was a straight league, and there was a couple of titles there, but still those last games where you clinched the league, they were pretty special weeks. A lot of nervous anticipation during the week, and of course, of the finals, everything's on it. And the difference nowadays with these finals is that even if you have finished top of the league, the conferences, there's still a chance for an outsider. And we were all perhaps back in Edinburgh last week. Ulster have done it to their great credit. So, I think the momentum is with them. They've got the confidence. They've got nothing to lose. But, Leinster, wow, what a team. Not functioning, but really are high favourites.
Yeah, I'll put my hand up. I doubted Ulster, but wow, they pulled off some comeback in the end. And we're going to get into some elements of that. Just to remind people, if you want to give us a question for next week, you can shout using the hashtag AnalystEye on social media. We have a couple of good ones for today. But just to kind of tee up what we're going to be looking at, we're going to use those bespoke stats, Sean, that we've been looking at the last few weeks. It's been brilliant to dig in a little bit more. Things like error counts, performances inside the 22. We're talking about penalty counts as well. That was really important at the weekend, as well as the gain line and the meters made after contact. So loads of stats coming up.
Yeah, we've got our own bespoke ones. We've been working hard behind the scenes with the analyst guys at Guinness PRO14. So a bit of jargon, our own jargon, Murray. But we'll also sort of zero in on some of the key performers from the semi-finals and ones to look out for in the final. And the back row is going to be huge. Marcel Coetzee was awesome. Caelan Doris, one of a plethora of back rows Leinster could pick from. Intriguing battle looming in the centre between Gary Ringrose and James Hume. What a fine semi-final. But then we're looking at these teams in a stat sense as well as to how they've been functioning since the restart. Makes interesting reading.
Yeah, sure does, and loads to get through. Let's get stuck in. You mentioned Caelan Doris there, man of the match, player of the match last weekend. Just so impressive for a 22-year-old. He's starting to really dominate games, and he's moved to blindside flanker. We pick him up here on the side of the scrum. It's obviously a role change. You can see his speed off the mark there to assist in the tackle on CJ Sander with Johnny Sexton, not giving that early gain line. And Leinster again winning it there. They tend to do that. I'm really impressed with Caelan Doris in the trenches. He loves this kind of stuff. First one, he probably gives up a little bit more in the contact than he would like, but he's going to work around the corner here, because he's just loving this close quarter stuff. And you're going to see him combine with Keller for a really dominant tackle in the end, driving Munster back. And those inches count so close to the try line. I've been impressed with that aspect. His decision-making is really good as well. You see there the link pass out the back to Johnny Sexton. He's got that ball handling skill. And that decision-making isn't just on the ball. It's around this breakdown area. Watch here how he picks and goes. He recognises that Luke McGrath is on the ground there. He buys them time, gets another bit of gain line, that fight on the ground, and now McGrath's back on his feet, and Johnny Sexton can kick in with that wonderful kicking game into the space. Lovely stuff from Doris. And something similar here as well. He's just a heads-up rugby player, a guy who can make decisions, break from the mould. He recognises the mix-up there from Munster and just picks and carries over the top for another big gain for his team. Really impressive stuff. Another thing to add is his line-out work. He's 6'4". He's a big guy, obviously, but he's really worked hard on this side of his game, and it's a massive, obviously, platform for Leinster. They've been good in that area. Last weekend in particular was really excellent. So he just brings so much. As well as that, he's a jackal threat. For a tall guy, it's maybe a bit of a surprise, but again, that fight in there, technically he's worked really hard on it. And it's just been so impressive to see him, I suppose, round out his game. We're going to see some of the carries later on, because in this game, he broke the gain line 79% of the time when he carried. So he's really bringing a complete game.
What does Leo Cullen do, mate? They've just got so many back rowers, Will Connors has been exceptional since the restart. You got Max Stegan. It's just so many to pick from, and young players. It's really exciting. Now, sticking with the back row for Ulster, Marcel Coetzee, well, he's a big player for them, but he really lifted them in that second half. In tandem, it has to be said, with centre Stuart McCloskey. He carried so much. I think it was 18 carries, most of them in that second half. And they're not all pretty carries. They're all sort of big big barnstorming, get across the gain line. He always presents and it comes back with quick ball. McCloskey's used differently. First phase, he gets across the gain line. Big man with good feet, again, gets across the gain line. See him here now barging through, takes 2-3 Edinburgh defenders. And they went down that short side quite a lot. But here's Coetzee again. Look, it's hard yards, but what it does, it sucks in the Edinburgh defenders. He was immense in the second half, a real talisman, inspirational. And they worked well together. As I say, they went back down that short side. McCloskey, they were probing there. It was a real clever sort of halftime team talk by Dan McFarland. Coetzee is so tired. He wasn't expecting that pass, but they linked up together for a little try. And look at this lovely little show, overhand, one hand, McCloskey reading from each other. He's got subtle hands as well, the big centre, and this was a fine try from Little. But he's not just about ball carries. This was a superlative turnover. From behind, you'll see that 3 Edinburgh players can't move him. Sort of brilliant technique. He gets into position here. It's Kinghorn. He latches on. His knees are off the ground. And look at 3 Edinburgh defenders. That was crucial because it got Ulster into position for a score. And again, down the short side, the big man, McCloskey, he was everywhere. They flashed down there, tried to exploit that. This guy, along with Coetzee, could make a huge difference. If they apply that pressure and get into the 22, Leinster, if they give penalties away in that area, we all know what Ulster can do when they kick the ball sort of into the 5-10 meter zone. Rob Herring is a try master off the maul. So, there's another one off both of their carries, and they got them into the position in the second half to force the penalties, force the lineouts, and get the 2 tries they needed.
Yeah, absolutely essential figures. And it's nice that you show clips there, not just of the physical stuff, because both of them can play, and that's what really makes them such key weapons. You mentioned their penalties. Like, this is something we talked about last weekend before the semi-finals. We knew it was going to be important, and so proved to be the case. It is a big area, the breakdown in the game at the moment, and we saw more evidence of that.
It's a massive part of the game. It really is. And we've got some sort of stats here, the tail of the tape, if you like. Penalty conceded since restart. Leinster, even though they haven't lost, they're giving away more penalties. It's interesting, isn't it? Breakdown penalties. Andrew Brace has been given the final on the weekend, and congratulations on our behalf to him. It's a big game for him, but he's got his work cut out in this area because, where Leinster do get penalties, as we'll find out later on, is, in their own 22. Any area of the game, this is Johnny Smith, any area of the game where Ulster have outperformed Leinster either early in the season or since the restart, well, it is in giving penalties away, breakdown penalties. We look at this, and Leinster have given away nearly twice as many penalties as Ulster in that area where the interpretations have slightly changed. And interestingly, in the last 30 minutes of games, this is an area that Ulster are better at than Leinster since restart. Nearly 3 times as, or more than 3 times as many penalties conceded in the last 30 minutes. And if you think back to that semi-final, Murray, that was the tail of the tape for Edinburgh, who conceded 6 penalties in the last 30 minutes, and Ulster went on to win it. So, big credit goes to our producer, Adam Redmond, who said that Ulster needed to keep penalties in single digits to win the semi-final, and they kept it at just 8. Can they do it again on the weekend?
Yeah, it was really impressive. I think that's all these stats point to the frustrations Leinster have had, though. I mean, they're still winning. They're still on that incredible streak, but they don't feel like they've got close to the potential they possess, the quality they possess, because they've slowed their own flow so many times with attacking breakdown penalties. A couple stand out even from the weekend. You think of Scott Fardy coming in the side. We'll see the clip a little bit later on, actually, when they're getting that momentum going on and over the gain line. So there's those little inaccuracies that Ulster will probably be looking at and maybe taking a bit of encouragement. But I just mentioned it there, the gain line stuff has been, again, for Leinster, a real strength. They've so many good ball carriers, so many powerful guys like Jack Conan here. I think Munster will be disappointed with some of the defence, but he shows his power. On the next phase, just watch Caelan Doris. There's a little subtlety to this. He's going to run that hard line close to the ruck. McGrath's going to scoot and then hit Healy coming late onto the ball, using his footwork, arriving onto the ball at pace, and then getting that power going. They're the little tools that Leinster use so well. Munster now obviously in a really tricky position, and they're going to be offside, clearly offside on the next one. There's no scandal, giving away the penalty. And Leinster decided to kick that 3 key points in the end, final scoreline. But just those tools that Leinster use. Here's another one, Doris. We mentioned him before, that pirouette through the contact. And then powering on, fighting on for extra meters after contact. Really excellent stuff from the number 8. Keller here, dropping his body, squeezing out those couple extra inches on the ground. And just look at Jack Conan here, calling for the ball. He's a distraction. Doris goes into that poor spacing between the Munster defenders. Multiple options there for Gibson Park. It is on that occasion passing from scrum half. And again, they're over the gain line into a position where they decide to kick from. This is off the back of a really good kick. We'll come back to this again. But I just really like how Leinster get into that flow. They probably should lose the gain line on this first one. You're going to see it's Doris. He's got to jump for that ball. Stander, I think, is a bit hesitant because he's worried about a penalty. But look at Doris, again, scrapping through the contact. There's a bit of bad spacing there on the right-hand side. Instead, it's a centre, Robbie Henshaw. He adds to the gain line progress there, fighting through the tackle. And then again, multiple options here. Really nice pass selection from McGrath out to Doris, just outside Stander. He gets out to the outside shoulder. And again, away he goes. Kelleher getting nice and flat this time because he recognises the momentum. And there's Scott Fardy, we mentioned it, coming in the side and just stopping that flow. Here's another example of where they actually lose the gain line. And I like this about Leinster. They actually continue to play. Sometimes in this game, they did decide to kick away if they lost the gain line. You're going to see them here, multiple rucks in a row, phases in a row where they're losing the gain line. But they managed to regenerate momentum in their attack. Just watch Johnny Sexton here. He's going to indicate, let's go back to the left-hand side of the ruck, where we've got nothing here on the right-hand side. Go to Andrew Porter. He's obviously a powerful guy. He gets some motoring again, and instantly Johnny Sexton's over on the other side, in behind those forwards, a little bit of shape. It's not too convincing, but they've just managed to regenerate, and they win a penalty down the left-hand side where it would have been easier to kick away a soft penalty, I know, and once we were frustrated by that, they felt Lowe was holding an O'Mahony, but it just shows that they don't give up straight away, and they have different ways for making that gain line, and it's just been so impressive from them.
They're great clips, Murray, because they show the level of detail that Leinster go to and the coaching that they get and the understanding the players have. Sexton, obviously an experienced player there, but the subtleties around finding little edges of forward carries, the way they present the ball very quickly, when they know when to flatten up, when there's an opportunity, as you said with Kelleher there, that's what stands Leinster out from all the other teams at the moment. And they're very, very difficult to stop. Now, throwing that to Ulster, they don't quite have those subtleties. They have those ball carries, as we mentioned a bit earlier, but when they put tempo in the game, it's a different Ulster side. We saw this earlier in the season from turnover and kick receipt. They're fantastic. But when they increase the number of passes, increase the number of offloads, they're a different side. And they showed this in the second half in particular. You know, having Stockdale to the wing added a different dimension because it found edges and little subtle inside passes. I forever have coached against Ulster, and I've told my players to watch the inside ball. And the little subtle tip inside from forwards is great. You know, then a little tip outside. We saw this with Coetzee carry, but it's the tip on from Marty Moore that makes a difference. Marty Moore looked like a big barrel in that second half, but he puts a real good shift in. Stockdale again on the wing, for me, just adds a different threat for Ulster. And when they get across the gain line and they make more passes, they're far more dangerous. That forced the last penalty that Madigan kicked over to win the game, of course. And they come alive from kick receipt. You know, they work really, really hard. You know, they get back in numbers, which is very, very important. It goes a little awry here, but as this develops, at the top of the screen, you see all the Ulster players moving back. They don't honeypot to the ball. They push back in their zones, and that gives them numbers. Now, then they put more passes in. They're so much better. Look, again, how they flatten up and get to that edge. This leads to the little try. Fantastic play. It's because they've reorganized and pulled back in their zones and not just wandered around the corner or migrated to the ball. And again, that comes from the training field and the transition training. So I think, you know, there was 11 offloads in this game, nearly double of what Edinburgh had, a lot of them in the second half. And I think they were chasing the game a little bit, you know, particularly after Hamish Watson had busted through. But they realised, hello, this is the real Ulster. We've got pace. We can offload the ball. We've got guys running inside support lines. And you look at the Edinburgh players here, they scrag, they're really slow getting back. Again, we got that McCloskey with a little step and back inside, you know, getting across the gain line. They worked that short side and they just moved Edinburgh around. For weeks, we've been saying about how Edinburgh are really difficult to get through. They found little edges with tips. And again, there they go, back to the short side. You know, McCloskey, there he is, sucking in the defenders. Van der Waal. and then they got the edge, and this man Little was on fire. He looked really dangerous for them. So they have the players, Murray. They really do. I just think more passes from Ulster, more offloads, increase the tempo, find the edges with the tip-ons, and they could cause some problems. Because what that does, and it's another bespoke statistic of ours, is their meters after contact go up. And we've been looking at average meters after contact that are made. And normally we talk about meters made in general terms from kick receipt. The fullback goes 30 meters. They don't really count. It's the meters after contact. And we'll see here our statistics, average meters made after contact. Ulster are up there. Leinster is still the best, averaging 3 meters after contact. But Ulster are approaching that if they play in that manner like they did in the second half. And of course, that creates pressure, doesn't it? But what Ulster have to do, as we keep saying, is, particularly in the knockout games, they have to lower their error count, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a real poor side of their game. We've discussed it before the semi-final, looking at this, and the stats speak for themselves there. Leinster certainly won't be happy with that 36 errors in possession since the restart. That's not up to their standards. But Ulster, particularly down the 22, we'll come back to this. This stat relates to that, because they're getting into the 22, getting into good positions. A number of those passages you showed actually ended with a handling error beyond the good build-up play. They've got to be more clinical with their handling, a little bit safer. I think it'll be really positive to see them using those subtleties, those tip-ons, and all the stuff you showed there, because we saw last weekend going against that Leinster defence with one-out carriers with no subtlety is just going to get shut down. So that's massive for them. Again, here's another one as well. Errors in exit situations. It feels like a boring part of the game, but it's massively important. Exiting your own half safely, securely, and putting pressure back on the opposition. There's a big one there. I mean, that speaks volumes, Sean.
It does speak volumes. I mean, you have to be clinical in these games. You don't get many chances to score, but also when you exit in your own territory, you have to be nailed on. Leinster aren't the sort of side that are going to go quick from lineouts. They want to build, get in that 22 because their scoring rate and possession stats are so good. They know they can wear you down and win penalties, but that might translate into Dwayne Peel saying to his players, look, we'll kick it on field, get a good kick chase and get them into a little bit of transition sort of touch rugby, if you like, because that's going to be one of Ulster's chance to do that. Look at errors in defence. Ulster, they're better again in this department than Leinster, but we talked about penalties earlier, Murray, and you talked about errors in attack. One thing Leinster are really good at, that more than any other side, is getting penalties in their own 22, and that's where Ulster have to battle. Do we play? Do we pass more? Do we offload? Do we risk a few things against the one-up carries, like you said, where Leinster can win penalties? They know when to do it.
And the thing is, like, we look back to last season, and Ulster came very, very close to beating Leinster. Obviously, it was a European tie that time, but there was a bit of a formula there, and it was a low error count, real physicality. They won the Gainline repeatedly in that game. Big carries from McCluskey, Coetzee tackling. They put a bit of aerial pressure, which is going to be an interesting part of the game. And I think they have loads of those tools, but it's just about being really nailed on with the error counts and getting their really impressive individuals into the game. We're going to look at the outside centre battle next, and this is a really interesting one because you've got a guy who's established, one of the first names on the Ireland team sheet, but with Ulster, you've got James Hume, who just turned 22, and he's got this opportunity in the starting team, a player of real potential. And now we're seeing him, even in the last couple of weeks, he's grown in his maturity, his decision-making, and we're seeing all these really good parts of his game. We're going to look at some of the clips here. He is a very powerful guy, obviously only a young player, but you can see him here punching onto the ball, really direct line. And this is some of Ulster's good stuff. This is Gainline. This is winning it, where you're using your power, you're getting a quick recycle, and over the Gainline. They look really good in those instances. This is similar, again, off line out. I like that line from Coetzee, just dragging the midfield defence off Hume, giving him a chance to get over the Gainline. And then there's Coetzee, who you mentioned as a talisman. He's getting on the ball. And you've won those 10 metres in the first couple of phases. He's also got good footwork, Hume. You see a double step here, inside, or outside rather, then back inside. There's not just power to his game. He's got those subtleties. There's one of those Ulster errors, though, Sean, that we mentioned earlier on. Another bit of footwork here. And another element to his game is the offload. He's really comfortable in playing the ball post-contact or through the contact. And he's got a really good attacking skill set. This is defensively. You can see him here. He's shutting down that backdoor option initially. And then when they're men on, he goes and takes that space, and you see the power again on Rob Kearney, just driving him back, winning those crucial couple of meters for Ulster. And something similar in our last clip here. He's going to get out of the line. He spots Bill Mada, really decisive. I like the way he accelerates into that. Obviously, good tackle technique down low around the ankles and leaving Edinburgh in a position where they're scrambling just to get out of trouble. So really impressive stuff from him on all sides. And I think it is going to be a big test for him because, as you're going to talk about now, he's going to come up against a centre who's at the peak of his powers.
You're blessed in Ireland with centres, aren't you? And James Hume, had a great game. He looks a real explosive sort of animal. But if he's just starting out, then Gary Ringrose is almost in his prime. People always talk about Brian O'Driscoll being a great player, score tries, make breaks. But people forget that Brian O'Driscoll was a brilliant defender as well. And as good as Ringrose has been since the restart, especially cutting through the line and being really good in that outside channel. Defensively, I've been so impressed with him. And he did it again against Munster. It's a difficult channel to work in defence. I love the way he moves. He goes up, he comes back. He's in a real vulnerable position. He closes off. He has to be high in the line. Look at this movement. He's shutting off, even though it's quite narrow in the field. He's up, shutting off, looking for big one-on-one hits. I like his movement back. He will rehearse this almost like a ballerina in training. He's calling people around. He understands, do I go in? He realizes he has to be on the edge. Bang, makes his tackle on Caelan and rolls away to get back into the line. It's a really difficult place to defend. He identifies when to put the shot in, and that's a big shot on standard. But look, he jumps out because he knows he has to be the gas man on the end of the line. Very, very important. Here he is again. Now, how difficult is this at high speed? Lots of options. Caelan, Farrell coming across him. He makes his decision in his read early, and out he comes to the line. And that forces the error. It's enough to put Caelan off. It's a very hard skill to do with sort of a three-dimensional view. And even though he's on the floor, look at the urgency. It's what I would call as a coach, do next. He's up and gone to the end of the line because he has to be the speedster. I love this clip. It's nothing really in it other than, look, I'm ready. He's on his toes. He's geared up. He knows he's got Farrell and Caelan, even though it's on the halfway line. I just love his energy and enthusiasm for defence. And kick chase is part of that. Here he is. Nice little clip as well. Farrell plays a little bit of cat and mouse, tries to run and shepherd his line. He gets past Farrell and makes the tackle. Again, he's in there. He's holding up, waiting for the cavalry, and watch him again. Understands, looks, I need to get outside Devon Toner. You're the slow guy. In you get. So, I mean, a really intelligent defender. And just watch on the kick chase here. This is like 79th minute. And even though it's 13-3, there he is circled. He chases this ball. It's well kept in by Daly, who's an elusive attacker. He has to come all the way in from infield and bang, nails him. Chops it down. That was Munster's last chance. Yes, scored two scores in the last 5 minutes, but that was the end for them. And Ringrose was absolutely fantastic in his defensive performance.
Yeah, really important guy. And we saw him take over the captaincy, didn't we, at the end of the game? That's been a development in his game. Stuart Lancaster, when he arrived over, he was kind of taken aback by the younger Irish guys being maybe not assertive or speaking up as much in the group setting, but he's worked with guys like Ringrose to develop that side. And it was a real marker that we saw him take over the captaincy in the final stages. Obviously, they did concede a yellow at that stage, so we would have been disappointed with that. But a guy who's grown and grown, and I mean, even in terms of the lines at the end of this year, Sean, what do you reckon? He's a guy who surely is going to be in the mix, even for the test team.
We know he was really close on the last tour. He's matured, in 3-4 years, and surely he's on the radar, because if you watch the intricacies of like that video that we've done, then the nuts and bolts of his game are in place, and he's a consistent performer. Jonathan Davis has been sort of the number 13 for the Lions, hasn't he, on the last two tours? But he's had a long injury. He's coming to an older age. Ringrose is right up there for me in Gatland's thoughts, and let's hope he can continue now, not just this weekend, but in the international games coming up.
Yeah, let me ask you another question we got in just on individuals. Tony Down Under asks us, who's the best 10 at Ulster? The Irish media appears to be saying it's a player who made one good kick. I think he's talking about Ian Madigan. That's a bit unfair on Madigan himself. He's obviously grown back into it, but maybe talk to us about Billy Burns, and he's been captain as well. We're talking about leaders. He's grown as a player for Ulster. What have you seen from his game that's important to Ulster?
Well, I think the fact that Dan McFarlane's given him the captaincy says a lot about Billy Burns. I thought he was excellent. I also watched him really closely, Murray, because he went down and had his calf strapped really early in the game. Sock down, calf strapped for kicking outside half. That's not easy, you know. And I saw the physio, and it wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. I thought, well, this guy's, you know, he's not going to have blood going through his body. It was so tight. But, you know, I watched him, and he laboured a little bit, but he still did so well. Epitomised by, of course, him running back in that passing channel and getting and cutting off a certain Edinburgh score. So, now I think he's the most complete all-round. For me, Madigan's, he's lacking rugby. He's a little bit flaky. He's too deep. It was a fantastic kick, and he did well coming on. But for me, Billy Burns holds the shirt. And, you know, if Ulster are to do anything, Madigan's probably best served coming off the bench in the final.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the bench impact from Ulster last weekend was obvious. They haven't always had that. Guys like Reedy and Treadwell were so physical. Matthewson, obviously, at scrum half, and I thought Lowry did well. It's brilliant for them to have those options. And I think it is going to be a key part of this game, as always, in a final. Who you bring off the bench, who's going to add that impact. So that's going to be a big part of it. Another one that we want to touch on is the kicking. This is something that's been a real theme over the last number of weeks. Leinster have focused on this in the lockdown, and we're seeing all the evidence. This is right off the first kickoff. You can see Hugo Keenan there. He's done a bit of escorting. Then he works around the corner. You talk about that work right off the ball. There's Ringrose doing the same inside him. Now there's that running threat, and Conway has to close up on the right edge. Johnny Sexton, as he tends to do, just picks out the space and finds the grass. I know Munster get back and claim it. They're now under pressure. Daly exits. He does well, but Leinster get a nice attacking line out from that left-hand side. Really good early chance, which they don't take. This is Ringrose on the exiting kick. There's Keenan again, really good work rate. A guy who they flagged, Leo Cullen flagged as having a huge work rate, and he did well in this instance to get around the corner. Ringrose just waits and waits for Hanrahan to close up on the right hand. This time, there he is, Hanrahan. And then Daly's got all that grass to cover. He's in a really tricky position. Again, I think he's been one of the bright sparks for Munster in the last 2 weeks. He does well to get his kick away, but it's infield. Johnny Sexton's running onto it. And now you're in a lovely position to build an attack. Really clever manipulation by Leinster. And talk about manipulation. Watch Sexton and Henshaw pointing to that right-hand side. They go 8-9 over there. They lure Munster slightly, and then they swing back to the left-hand side, and a beautiful crossfield kick from Johnny Sexton. This is something Ross Byrne does really well as well. That crossfield kick, they're both excellent at it, and just that clever manipulation. This is something similar on a box kick setup. It looks like they're going to go deep. Ross Byrne calls that kind of audible, and you can see how Stockdale now has to cover right across the pitch. Again, they find the grass, get a really nice bounce, sits up for Kinsella, and away they go and tackle into the 22 and score 3 points off the back of that. It's been really impressive, Sean, to see them, a team that was so strong already. They look like they're adding another string to their bow there.
I definitely think it's part of the game they've developed and worked on it. And, you know, looking at those clips, we've prepared them in the week, but I can just hear some of my mates, like some coaches out there, some real nerds. They're loving our Analyst show, and because they're all saying, "Oh, yeah, I saw that," or "I thought I saw that." And, you know, when you package them together like that, then you can really see it's a development part of their game. And even when Ross Byrne plays, you know, Kieran Frawley plays, you see these little kicks in there. And it's going to be all for Ulster to do to cover that space. It's so difficult because they're, of course, a team that defends with 9 in that 5-metre channel and on the edge. So a lot of grass for Little and people like Stockdale to cover. But, of course, for all the kicking and that, then it does come down to scoring points, Murray. And let's have a little look at our sort of bespoke 22 entry stats and get ourselves warmed up here. Now, this is the efficiency inside the 22, the pressure they put on, the recycle of the ball, the winning of penalties, the gain line. And there's nobody better than Leinster, 83%. I mean, Ulster improved that in the last week or two, but 83%. And the big one, of course, is then getting the points. You know, what is that converted like? And, you know, Ulster are just the best in the league at this from our stats since doing this, our bespoke stats. Ulster a little bit lacking there, mate.
Yeah, it's a brilliant stat to track because even over the course of 3 weeks, you can really see the trend. We spoke about it earlier on, Ulster missing chances in the 22. Anyone who's watching the games will have been able to see that, but to have it backed up with that clear cold data is brilliant. And to see just how efficient Leinster are compared to all the other teams, it's just a mindset. They flick a switch when they're attacking the 22. They turn up the accuracy levels, they turn up the aggression levels, and they rarely miss a chance to keep that foot on the throat. Ulster do have to improve that this weekend. They just simply can't miss those chances. Like, think back to the first half against Edinburgh, number of visits down into the 22, and then they just got no reward. Moore was defended very well. I thought they actually did pretty well to recover from that and score those 2 Maul tries, obviously. But they've got to take their chance against Leinster, because Leinster are so good at limiting your access into the 22 in the first place. And then when you get in there, they're really good at stopping you, aren't they, Sean?
Yeah, they are. And a lot of people say to me, why are Leinster so good? Oh, it's because they have a big budget, they have a big squad, it's a city, province, and this, that, and the other. But, you know, this sort of statistical information and the clips that we're showing are highlighting that they're great players, but they're well coached, well drilled, they understand what they're doing. And we're going to talk now a little bit about numbers on feet, which is a little bit of an unheard of statistic for most, and it's part of our toolbox of bespoke stats again that probably paints an ominous picture for Ulster for this weekend. First, there's some good news for Ulster. Sort of players on feet in attack. Now, this is when, on average, Ulster have 12 people on feet to attack, like we saw in the second half against Edinburgh, and they far outweigh Ulster. It might be why Leinster have stuttered a little bit. They may be overcommitting to that breakdown, worried about penalties, you know, and committing their maybe short carries. Don't know, but Ulster certainly are ready to attack. This is the way they coach. I know Dwayne Peel very well, Dan McFarland. You know, when they play, they want to play with tempo. But it's in defence, you know, when Leinster are just so well set up, they suffocate teams. Players on feet in defence.
Yeah.
15 players on feet. Now, Leinster are only just above Ulster in that. But when we flip that to 14 players on feet, then this is where. So you were talking, combine those, nearly 70% of the time, Leinster have 14 or 15 players on feet. And then, of course, when you're talking about stopping the opposition inside the 22, that translated manifests itself in that statistic, you know, stopping tries in the 22, 78% of the time. Wow.
Yeah, they're mind-blowing stats. They really are, and they underline what Leinster are so good at. The defenders on feet is something, when we started talking about doing this show, this was one of the first ones we wanted to track, because we were watching Leinster games and just every phase you could see the work rate, the energy to get back on feet. It's something for people to watch at the weekend. When a Leinster player makes a tackle, they're either using the momentum of the tackle to swing themselves back up, or they're bursting off the ground with a really explosive movement. It's clear that it's something that they measure themselves, that they take pride in. And that's why it's so hard for opposition attacks to break them down, because there's rarely space. The backfield's pretty well covered because you've got guys on their feet there. And then when you get in, it's the pride of that 15 players on feet in the 22, maybe one guy hovering in behind. They go to that 14+1, but they're brilliant at stopping you. They're selective, I think, with their jackals. The defenders on feet stat it's worth highlighting that. Ulster, 14 players ready to defend 32% of the time, because they do commit to the jackal more. There's our stat again. They do commit into that ball more often. Like guys like Coetzee will go for that jackal, whereas Leinster are probably a bit more selective, aren't they, in when they actually attack the tackle.
Well, that's why that statistic's so high. You know, they probably have a call of when to stay away. You know, it might be a blue call, for example, where nobody goes for it. You know, the scrum half might be shouting blue, blue, but they want to get all those players on feet, and then they'll identify when to attack it. So it's really, really impressive. It's difficult outside the stats to see other than a Leinster win, but I'm going to put it to you first, Murray. Predictions for the weekend, please.
Yeah, let's maybe call a margin. So, because I'm Leinster as well, I think Ulster are going to get closer than maybe what the bookies are fancying them. I think there'll be maybe a 5-point margin. I think they'll push them. I think they'll have the tools. Like, we've looked at their handling skill. They're going to try and get tempo in it. They've shown they can physically compete with Leinster before, and I think they'll run them close. But yeah, I'm going for a 5-point win. What are you thinking?
Well, in my experience of playing Leinster, beating Leinster, particularly in big games, you've got to not be afraid to go out and try and win it. I say this a lot on podcasts. You've got to not be afraid of going out and trying to win it, rather than going there and trying not to lose it. You know, that's the first important thing. And I think I always used to say, if you stay in the game away to Leinster by one score with 10 minutes to go, who's the pressure on? That's an important thing the Ulster players need to remember. If they stay in that game by playing the way they play, all the pressure's on Leinster. And if you think back to certainly the two Ospreys victories in the finals, then that's what they've done. They've either got their noses in front or they've stayed in the game and given themselves one chance at the end. That's what Ulster did against Edinburgh last week. So that's the romantic in me, Murray, but the pragmatic in me says that I can't go outside the stats, and it will be deservedly on the season a Leinster win.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a cracker either way. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Sean, thanks a million. Enjoy the game. We also say thanks to our producer, Adam, and Paul Larter for all the work on the stats and videos. Most of all, thanks to all of you for watching along. And don't forget to fire your questions on social media using #AnalystI. But in the meantime, enjoy the Guinness Pro 14 final, and we'll see you next week.